Where did Formula One come from? When did it start? Who came up with this idea? And why, after all, the name Formula One? Many people watch the races here and outside Brazil, see overtakes, cheer for drivers, watch the podium ceremony, and perhaps never knew the origins of where all this, after all, began. And it started well before Formula One. Because today, then, we are going back to the beginnings, to the early eras of motorsport, with those cars that looked like carriages with engines, on dirt tracks without seatbelts, let alone helmets, because it was there that everything began to reach where we are today. And that's what we're going to talk about today on Splash and Go, in a glorious re-recording of what was once episode number 1 of this channel back in 2021, when it still had another profession. Let's go! Many people think that motorsport began with Formula One and therefore would have emerged back in 1950. But that is a misconception. The truth is that the passion for speed is much older. And using a phrase from Henry Ford, who said motorsport began from the moment you had manufactured the second car, because from then on it was possible to compete and see who would reach that tree, that corner, or the end of that road first. We start from this point to go back and explore the origins and the birth of Grand Prix racing. And right away, I present a reflection here. At the first official Formula One Grand Prix in Silverstone, England in 1950, King George was present. Father of Elizabeth, mother of Charles. You must agree with me that this event was already significant. And it wasn't starting there, like Varsa and His Majesty. Having nothing better to do, he decided to take a stroll around that airfield in the English countryside, right? As I mentioned, motorsport didn't originate there and dates back much earlier. But what was then the first race on record? The earliest records date back to the 19th century, but specifically 1894, when, for the first time, those almost carriages with internal combustion engines competed in the first race. As far as we know, racing on roads, passing through villages. This first race that we know of, because it's evident that others might have happened, and we are unaware, was organized by a Parisian newspaper called Le Petit Journal, Little Journal, which circulated between 1863 and 1940, the penultimate year of the Second World War. The challenge was to cover 126 kilometers from Paris to the city of Rouen. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's spelled what? I think it's Rouen. Let me see. Rouen, which is spelled French. Let's find out now. Ryan. The race had a classification, which in this case was not the fastest lap because there was no lap. It was just a linear distance between the two cities. But a 50-kilometer stretch on the eve had to be covered, and whoever did it the fastest would start on pole, and then subsequently, second, third, and fourth would form the grid. The rule stipulated that everyone who completed the route in less than 3 hours was ready for the lap. Classified, meaning there was already a 107% rule, so to speak, and already aiming to attract as much public attention as possible. Therefore, it's not just today that the business is media-driven. The municipalities of Paris and the cities through which the track passed chose a route that aimed to maximize impact with the public, crossing more densely populated regions, etc. Do you understand me? The grid then, using the cars with internal combustion engines and others with steam engines, had 21 classified and 30 registered, because some, 9, were unable to qualify below the maximum time of 3 hours. And the victory went to Jules Albert de Didion, I think that's how you say the name, Jules Albert de Didion, who crossed the finish line 6 hours and 48 minutes after the start, which gave an average speed of 19 kilometers per hour. For comparison, nowadays, an ultramarathon runner completes a 100-kilometer race at an average of 15 kilometers per hour. He won the race with a car built by himself and his partner. The name of the car? Didion Bouton. Detail in the middle of the race, see how fancy, they would stop for lunch and the restart was staggered just like in a rally between stages. If you don't know what I'm talking about, since this is a video to explain many things in a rally between one stage and another, The arrival difference, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes between the cars, is maintained at the restarts, let's say. And if you arrive 2 minutes ahead of me, when it's time to start again, you go and I only leave 2 minutes later. Very chic. I can't guarantee that no one was having, and I don't know if they also had a strong coffee to continue on the route. In second place, 3 minutes and 30 seconds later, 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧. Oh, I think that's how you say it, 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮 with the Peugeot car. And even at that time, look at that, we had backstage drama. Because Didion, who won the race, was disqualified by the commissioners at the time called referees. According to the judges of the time, he did not comply with one of the procedures of the Parc Fermé regime, or in French, Parc Fermé. I've explained this in the shorts, but I'll quickly go over it. After a race ends, nowadays, for example, the cars are placed in a fenced area and cannot be touched by drivers in the team, until they are inspected by the commissioners to check if everything is in order. This place, therefore, is called Parc Fermé because of this. It is not open to just anyone. Therefore, you can see that confusion was already part of motorsport long before Formula One. Even dreaming, being born. Another thing deeply rooted in what would be the origins of the future Formula One, starting from 1950, was the noble character of those who participated. Confusion of counts, barons, marquises, and the high European industrial bourgeoisie of the early 20th century. People, owners of large companies, landowners, colonies around the world, all that stuff. So, smile when that friend of yours or your uncle says at the lunch table that nowadays money rules the tracks. It has always been like this. The first Grand Prize known by this name, Grand Prix in French, took place in 1906 in Le Mans. But it was a different circuit, though it passed through that region in France. The lap was, listen well, 105 kilometers long, passing through 3 cities in a roughly triangular shape. And it had 32 participants representing 12 different manufacturers. And the victory went to the Hungarian. I won't even dare to pronounce it. His name, I think it's Ferencis. With the Renault, which won the race after 12 laps and therefore 1,260 kilometers, of course, in a race that was divided in half, 6 laps on one day, 6 laps on the other. How is that? That's right, people would sleep in the middle of the race. At the end of the day, everyone wraps up the activities, notes the differences, and the next day, early in the morning, everyone sets off for the second part, in short, maintaining the differences. On this day, the roads were closed because up until then, many times, the races took place alongside regular traffic of the highways. Therefore, you were here, driving your old banger, and a bunch of crazy people would pass by you at full speed. Full speed in quotes, but you get what I mean. But the idea of closing the roads to regular traffic, at least during the race, in this case 2 days, was due to a race between Paris and Madrid in 1903, where several people, both drivers and spectators, suffered terrible accidents, with consequences including deaths. The French police stopped the race as the participants were passing by the city of Bordeaux due to the carnage. Everyone's soft, as you can see. And where does the name Grand Prix come from? Well, I think you can already guess. In the beginning, to attract participants, obviously the organizers thought, what if we offer some money? From whom? From the municipalities, the governments, and also from the brands that were already willing to sponsor to appear and attract everyone's attention. There, the motorsport maxim that is still in force today applies: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. And as you can imagine, each organizer, depending on the budget they had available, attracted more participants, financed a better or worse infrastructure. In short, each one did it their own way. Each one did as they could. And therefore, at this time, pre-Formula One, each Grand Prix had whatever rules it saw fit. Distance, technical regulations, sporting regulations, which means in one place something was an infraction, in another it wasn't, and so on. Open circuits, night races, day races, speed races, regularity races, identical cars for everyone, free for all, each one does what they want. Driver plus co-driver, an endless array of options. And besides the difference in all the rules, there was a difference in prizes and a difference in scoring, which made it very complicated to have a championship that would satisfy humanity's evident curiosity. Who is the best driver and car? We had plenty of Grand Prix races. France, Italy, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Morocco, Argentina, Brazil. Everyone had a big prize to call their own, including here, Grand Prix of the city of Rio de Janeiro at the 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙤𝙀. Grand Prix of the city of São Paulo in the Jardins. Yes, it's been a long time. I am promising. One day I will manage to produce content about this. But I wanted to. And at the 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙤, I don't know if I will be able to. The drivers basically lived off prizes and salaries that were paid by the teams and shared with the mechanics. There was no sponsor money for them, at least at that time, and the money from those who paid to appear and stick their stickers was basically directed to the Grand Prix, not the participants. The factory teams were a competitive arm of major brands, who very early on realized that this business attracted attention and conveyed the ideal of my car. It's good, my car won, you should buy one of those. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. What I call on this channel the unanswerable question was popping up there. Who is the best? How to know this? If each place had its own rules. Between 1924 and 1928, the International Automobile Association recognized clubs, which have a name in French that I can't pronounce, tried to organize a tournament, a championship as we know it today. But it didn't quite work out because they couldn't agree on the rules. But what they were beginning to agree on was that they needed to create a formula. Up until then, we were living in the era of the so-called free formula. At that time, and until 1934, there were almost no restrictions. And each one would fit the largest possible engine with the tires they deemed suitable without any obligation to safety. And they would send the driver to the track. The grand prizes turned into major events, attracting crowds, and each country wanted to organize its own. The races of these early championships jumped from 5 in 1927 to 9 in 1929, reaching a peak of 19 in 1934. But then, with the emergence of tensions that would result in the Second World War between the nations of Europe, things went downhill. And when the conflict broke out, motorsport came to a halt in the Old World. It stopped in the Old World, but it would not stop in the United States and would not stop here in Brazil. But yes, before World War II, we had at least one championship in 1925. 3 in Europe and 1 in the United States. Yes, did you think? Right. The Indianapolis 500. It was the European Grand Prix. In England, the French Grand Prix, the Italian Grand Prix, and in the USA and AI. Incredibly. This was a championship only for constructors. There was no drivers' championship. In 93, it is important to make here the historical record of the first Grand Prix in Monaco, which was also the first time that the starting order was decided by a lap timed on the eve. Wait, but you mentioned the race earlier, which had a classification to form the grid? But it was a mini race, like a sprint. At this time, a rule was established that would dictate the color of Formula One cars. Even today, the colors by federation. Each country had a specific color for all manufacturers under that registration. The Italians, all of them, raced in red, you see? Lancia, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Fiat. All of them. Wait, and Ferrari? Ferrari was just being born. And it started as a racing division of Alfa Romeo. The English raced in green. The French raced in blue. The Germans raced in white. And when it got closer to World War II, they raced in silver. In silver? In silver. And it wasn't because of that story about scraping off the paint because of weight. They tell that story to avoid awkwardness. It turns out that in the pre-World War II era, to showcase their highly advanced technological capability, they didn't use paint to show the aluminum, which was silver-ish, and at the time was very expensive and very difficult to handle in industrial processes that the Germans mastered. It was a kind of predecessor to carbon fiber. However, since this involves issues of superior race, etc., the Germans don't like to tell this story. They don't talk about scraping off the paint because of the weight, etc. It's a bit nicer, right? So, the Germans abandoned white and started racing with silver. Mercedes, auto unions as the main exponents. During this period, still before World War II, and with strong support from the German government, three exponents racing for the German teams, Auto Union and Mercedes, as I just mentioned, the three great names of pre-Formula One motorsport were born. Fernando Romeo Rudolf Caracciola and the Italian Tazio Nuvolari. Nuvolari is that legendary figure who even raced motorcycles while in a cast, positioned to drive. It was during this time, in fact, that there existed a scoring system that today would be considered bizarre and was derived from equestrian competitions. I even talked about this in the video about the points system. Editor, do you remember the thumbnail of that video? It's been a while since we published it. In which the winner of a race would receive 0 points, the second place would get 1 point, the third place 2, and so on. Just like in equestrian events, those jumping competitions where you have to complete a course within a time limit and without knocking down the obstacles. And if you do knock them down, you accumulate points. In other words, the winner is the one who completes the course with 0 points. I learned this from my friend Fernando, who did equestrian sports when we were teenagers. Since everyone lived off prizes, many unofficial races existed. Because when there wasn't a championship race, people would race around for money. That's why the drivers came to Brazil to compete in the race in Gavia and São Paulo. Or they would go there. To New Zealand and Australia, taking advantage of the fact that nothing happened during the European winter. And it was summer here or over there in Australia. These peripheral races didn't always attract the best drivers, and manufacturers would send the B version of their cars with, let's call them, apprentices. Like a Red Bull that wouldn't send Verstappen, but would only send Lawson, and wouldn't send this year's car, but the 2022 car, and so on. At that time in Gavia, everyone wanted to see Volare, but he never came. Okay. ADM, beautiful, but where did Formula One come from? So, we've reached the point. After 1939, the world entered World War II, from which it would only emerge in ruins in 1945. Therefore, you notice that from 1945 to 1950, there was no Formula One. We almost didn't have any Grand Prix races in Europe. Why? Because there was no atmosphere and there were no conditions. The continent was starving. A few years later, in 48, 49, that's when the sporting confusion of the International Association of Recognized Automobile Clubs, the one with the unpronounceable name, then takes on the cause of rebuilding the Grand Prix races of motorsport in Europe. And in the first discussions, the idea of creating a single championship already emerged with a uniform set of regulations for all the races. When I say regulations, uniform, technical regulations, engines like this or engines like that, and sporting regulations, distances, disciplinary rules, etc. The same. Which meant that from then on, the Monaco Grand Prix, the Silverstone Grand Prix, Spa-Francorchamps, Monza, etc. All of these were in the first championship, and they would all have the same rules, the same distance, the same scoring among them, and Indianapolis was part of this group. Indianapolis. Between 1950 and 1960, the American race was part of the championship. Not that the Europeans went there or the Americans came to Europe, but it was part of it. And this was a device to give a more global aspect to the championship, which was basically contested in Europe. There are no precise historical records about whose idea it was. But the general consensus among those who study this is that Antonio Brivio Sforza, a marquis, another noble, another wealthy individual, was one of the leaders who spearheaded the project around 1948 and 49, as I mentioned. While the regulations were being discussed among various federations, it was more or less agreed that the name Formula would be part of the nomenclature of this new category. And the idea was to convey the ideal that it would be an elite category, a main category, a major category. And then the discussions began. Formula Eendag was one of the ideas. International Formula was another. But fortunately, someone had the brilliant idea to suggest Formula One, which is much better. In the first regulation, it was defined that the races would have, as they do today, 300 km plus 1 lap. This is how the number of laps in a race is determined. 300 km divided in half. of each of the laps, for example, here in São Paulo, Interlagos, 4,309 meters. And then one more lap is added because it's 300 plus 1, except for Monaco, which, due to having a very low average speed, completes only 260 kilos. On the technical side, a reasonably simple regulation. The engines would be 4.5 liters, naturally aspirated, huge, or 1.5 supercharged, or turbocharged, a cousin of the turbo by belts. Then in 1950, the first Formula One World Championship emerged, which would have 7 stages. Silverstone, Monaco, United States, Indianapolis, and Switzerland in Bremgarten, Belgium, in Spa-Rams, in France. I think that's how you say it. And Italy among these, to this day, 4 still host Formula One, besides Indianapolis, which has the Indy because of the presence of Indianapolis, which you see in the statistics books or on Wikipedia as young people do today. A bunch of Americans with a victory in a Grand Prix were the winners between 1950 and 1960. And so, in 1950, on a Saturday, not a Sunday, with the illustrious presence of Ray George, the Formula One World Championship was born. Right from the start, 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙜𝙡, glamorous, filled with celebrities where money made a big difference. But about the money specifically, we will talk in a future edition because I will also re-record the video. The money, about how the distribution of money works in Formula One. This was then another episode of Splash and Go on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, it's free, costs nothing, and helps the channel a lot. Do me a favor, do us a favor in 2025. And I ask you to leave it with us as well. Your hype, this new tool of the mysterious algorithm. Ask that you show him that you like the channel, like the work, like our videos. So, do us this favor. We have here this number of likes, comments, and hypes greater than channels with 10, 15 times our number of subscribers. Because every time I ask, you leave a like, a comment, and a hype, our engagement is much higher. You are the ones responsible. Flattery done, so go ahead. It costs nothing, all right? To receive notifications of all the videos we make here at a frenetic pace, all year round, we have notification channels on Telegram, WhatsApp, and also a newly created one on Instagram. You join and start receiving. You join and start receiving a little message as soon as I publish each of the contents. Finally, but not least, we have the channel's social media. Instagram, Twitter, Thread, and TikTok, where content is released all the time. And we keep growing at a gallop. All right. So that's it. Thanks, and a big hug.